4 p.m. And we're holding this meeting in person, but we have people as well that are participating remotely. And if there's anyone else that's trying to tie into the meeting access information is right on the top of the agenda. And so welcome, and I'm going to find out everybody that's here. So I'm going to start here in the room with Don Hammond. If you say your name and where you're from, Don.
Don Hammond from Rochester.
Peter Nelson, Newmarket.
Rick Michaud, Somersworth.
Barbara Holstein, Rochester. Joe Boudreau, Rochester.
Mike Levinsky, City of Somersworth.
Mark Richardson, Somersworth, and I couldn't find my name tag.
Tom Crosby, Maverick. Dave Landry, Dover.
Jen Sis, Stratford Regional Planning.
Okay, and the folks that are participating remotely, I'll just read out their names because it'll be hard to tell when we're being pointed to or whatever, but Leslie Schwartz from Durham, Victoria Parmalee from Northwood, Kevin McDougall from Wakefield, Stephanie Benedet from Dover, Lindsay Williams from Dover, and I think I have everybody.
We also now have Wes Merritt from Durham.
I'm sorry?
Wes Merritt.
Okay. Wes Merritt from Durham. So, welcome. Just to get past this point, we have to have a quorum for our meetings in the current state of the law by way of the governor, and the bylaws that we have require a quorum in person. We're a little short today. We typically would have to have 7 based on the number of communities that are dues-paying communities that are here, physically here. We don't have enough, but I'm going to read this into the record. And what it is it gives me the authority to conduct the meeting with an adjustment on the quorum. And in order to continue after that, the people in the room have to say, yes, that's okay, so that we can continue, okay? So, quick quote, quorum of the commission consists of at least 1/2 of the dues-paid municipalities that have appointed commissioners. When a quorum is not present, but commission action is essential, the chair may declare a quorum with the unanimous approval of those commissioners present. So we've got to go through this again, starting with Don. Just say yea or nay. Peter?
Yes.
Richard? Barb?
Yes.
Joe? Mike?
Yes.
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 Okay, Don, Dave, Landry, yes. So we're good. We'll move on from there. So, and staff, if you would introduce our 2 guests as well, if you would do that, I appreciate that.
Sure, I'll go quickly through staff that are participating online. We have Megan, Shayna, Kyle, Nancy, Stephen, Jackson, Rachel, Kathy, Autumn, James, and Natalie. And then we have guest speakers, Bill Boulanger and Rayann Dionne, as well as Jackson Kaspari, who's Dover, correct?
Correct.
Your new
Yes.
resiliency coordinator.
Resilience coordinator. Right, exactly.
And I will note that between in person, we have more than the 7 that would have been a quorum, but it's not the right, we have more than 7 bodies, not 7 communities. But between in person and virtual, we have 8 communities participating. So that's why Dave and I felt comfortable suspending the rules.
Okay, with that in mind, let's move on to the items we have to vote on before we get to the presentation. So under business items, A, approval of the minutes of September 23rd, 2021. Requires a motion. Don?
23rd.
Second.
Second, Barb. All in favor in the room?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On my
Okay.
votes.
We're going to abstain because I wasn't here.
Okay. Yeah, they get to vote.
Okay, then, I'm sorry. And, I'm not sorry, you get to vote. That's not what I meant. Online then, Leslie?
Abstain?
Victoria,
Abstain.
Kevin,
Approve.
Stephanie,
Approve.
Lindsay,
Abstain.
and Wes, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that takes care of that. And B, approval of the fiscal year 2022 mid-year budget. And Jen, would you jump in on that?
Sure.
Take a look at your packets.
Yes, everyone should have a copy of the draft mid-year packet in their draft mid-year budget in your packet. And we apologize for our printing, but we decided not to waste paper and reprint. So just some high-level items that have changed here and what is changed. I believe I've highlighted everything in red that is a new number from what was adopted back in June. And every year around December, we do a look at where we are and adjust the budget as needed or if needed. So high level changes on the revenue side. We have many contracts that carry forward between multiple years. So after we closed out the month of June and fiscal year 21, we knew how much actually carried forward into this fiscal year. So we've adjusted several of our contracts that have that span multiple years, just based on what we actually have for this fiscal year. At the beginning of the year, we base it on an estimate of where we expect to be. Another change here is we've broken out the EDD, the Economic Development District planning grant dollars just into the separate contracts and have added one substantial new item, the Regional Housing Needs Assessment Grant that we have received. It is ARPA funds that have been sub-granted to us from the Office of Planning and Development, which is a division of the Department of Business and Economic Affairs. So some of the major changes on the revenue side. On the expense side, the main changes here are adjustments in the personnel category. This is at the time that we adopted the mid-year budget, we had a position open. And so now that our open positions have been filled and everything has been squared away, we have set numbers for this fiscal year. I will note that one of those changes, if you look down under outsourced contracts, financial services, you'll see that that's significantly reduced. That's Kathy. And Kathy, who is, oh, hey, folks, that video. Kathy is now officially an employee of Stratford Regional Planning Commission. She had been contracted. She owned her own private accounting consulting firm. She has sold her firm and is now works directly for us. So that's one of the things that you see. You see the dollars from the financial services added up into the employee line. The other things are just adjustments to other things based upon the number of bodies and just squaring up the budget with all of our individual contracts.
Welcome, Kathy. Okay, let's see. Does anybody have any questions about the mid-year budget? Anything, anybody out there remotely have a question on that budget, on this budget? Don't see anybody. It's kind of hard to tell, so please, if you do on anything at all during the meeting, give a good wave or something, because it's not as easy as you might think for some of us to figure this out, looking at the, especially me. Okay, so if I can get a motion on
The
that,
motion to approve the
Don?
budget.
I'll second.
Mike Levinsky seconded. On the room, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
Aye.
Okay, I gotta do this again, right?
Perfect.
Okay, so Leslie,
Aye.
Victoria,
Aye.
Kevin, Evan?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. Stephanie?
Aye.
Steve?
Aye.
And Wes?
Aye.
Nobody
I
else
do
is
believe
come
so.
along, right? Okay, okay, and that passes. Thank you. Moving on to C. HB 1275, municipal representation on the regional planning commissions. Jen, you want to introduce this? We did bring this, it was brought up at the last policy meeting. But there's no way all of these people on today, because we have quite a turnout collectively. So if you give a little background on that, as if it was brand new to everybody, it just would be easier, I think.
Sure, certainly. So the bill that's been put forward is coming from several different representatives, primarily from the Manchester and Nashua areas. What it proposes to do is to change the apportionment of commissioners from each community. It's changing the formula in statute. Currently, all communities up to 10,000 in population are entitled to 2 commissioners. Communities with populations from 10,000 to 25,000 have 3 commissioners. And communities over 25,000 have 4 commissioners. Under this revised proposal, all communities would have 1 commissioner, and then communities larger than 10,000 for each additional 10,000 would receive an additional 1 commissioner. On the back of the memo that's in your packet, you have a copy of how that would play out in our region. For us, we have a total current possible of 42 commissioners. We currently have 32, so not all of the seats are filled. It would be reduced down to 26 under the new model. The biggest impact would be, well, Somersworth would lose 1, and then all of our communities with less than 10,000 in population would also lose 1 commissioner under the new model.
Can you just name those communities so we're all clear without trying to do math and all that?
Sure. So basically, everybody loses 1 except for Dover and Rochester. Dover and Rochester would keep 4, and everyone else would lose 1 from their current allotment. So Somersworth would go from 3 down to 2, and everyone else would go from 2 down to 1.
Okay, thank you. All right, so as far as there must be somebody that has an opinion on this. Yeah,
I have a
don't know.
question, I have a question and an opinion.
Who's speaking now?
That would be Leslie.
Leslie.
Hi, I'm sorry,
Hi,
Leslie
Les-
Schwartz, Durham. I was looking in the document as well as the actual language online earlier and previously. And I couldn't find, what's the required, what is the date for a required response from SRPC?
Sure, so we actually don't know yet. I would anticipate so that this will have its first hearing at some point in January. The bill does already have a number. So generally those that are released sooner are heard sooner. It'll be going to the House Municipal and County Government Committee, but none of the committees have scheduled their hearings yet. So it's possible that, so we have a policy meeting in 2 weeks. And then it could be scheduled sometime around then and before we have our next policy committee meeting in January. Things typically go pretty fast once they're scheduled.
Is this something that it would be appropriate for which to create a subcommittee or task force or some other smaller group to study the various elements involved and give a recommendation?
That would be your collective call.
That's certainly an option. That's what we're doing here today. We know it's
It's new,
being proposed. We
Yeah.
just need to figure out what we think about it.
what we want to do and if we want
And
to
what
do
we
something.
want, and we don't actually have to do anything today. So, but this is the time to toss out options. So thank you. That's one. Peter?
I'll weigh in with my opinion. I think it's simple, streamlined, and makes sense to me. I don't have any problem with it, other than the only potential downside I see is because you are only limited to one, you don't have anybody as a backup, so there's always the issue of achieving a quorum. So again, that's the only downside to this, because you know, there's no backup plan, one representative in the towns.
This is Victoria. I have a question.
Go ahead, Victoria.
What's the, have the reps that are proposed this, have they indicated why they want to do this? Because I don't see the motivation behind it. I don't understand what it is. Just, I mean, you could say it's to streamline, but
We're not
what
certain.
purpose?
I know that Sylvia Von Alloc, who's the director of Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission, as well as Nate Miller, who's the deputy director there. They've met with Representative Willem, but they're still, I think it was just a general thought of, well, bigger communities should have more representation. And that was, I think, the main thought. I don't think there was anything nefarious or no, in the reasoning. I will note that all of the RPC directors we've asked to coordinate through the New Hampshire Association of Regional Planning Commissions to meet with the bill sponsors and collectively as the 9 regions speak to the sponsors and better understand what's intended. The goal is to try and schedule that meeting in December. So Dawn, stay tuned. You'll be getting an inquiry probably.
I have another comment.
Is this Leslie again?
This is Leslie again, sorry. Leslie Fortsturm, yes. When I was reading the information and the breakdown, and this is kind of to speak to Victoria's question, and I don't have an answer to that question, but I was thinking about, you know, from whence this might have come. And I've been seeing in a number of organizations the challenges of getting volunteers and being able to fill seats and so forth. And I don't know if that's an element of this. And of course, the upside being, you know, maybe it's easier to solicit volunteers with a different formula, or, you know, be it this formula that's proposed or another one. The downside of that is, as Peter pointed out, if you then have fewer representatives, you're more dependent, and then obviously fewer opinions, possibly less diverse input. So just a comment, and as I said, I was wondering as well along Victoria's thinking of from whence this recommendation or suggestion may have come. Thank you.
So thank you, Leslie. Just a kind of a point of order question. These are good questions, and what I'm wondering is we should keep all these questions, and I guess we would, at least initially, we would provide them to the our representative that's going to be attending this, so that we make sure those questions are asked and answered. I mean, it should be,
Yes.
but we want to make sure they have them, so they're asked, right? Okay. Peter again? I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'll say one quick thing. Could you just remind us what the quorum requirement is again for the number of towns?
For us here,
Yeah,
it's 7, right?
7.
7.
7 communities.
Okay, so that's not too bad.
Well, we can talk about that, but you know, some days it seems like it is, but.
Just for my own clarity, and I don't know if anybody else's, but since the bill already has a number, essentially, we are voting yes or no on.
We're
I
actually,
mean, we can give an opinion, but the opinion doesn't allow for a change because the bill already exists. It's either vote for it. The representatives are either gonna vote for the bill as it is, or they're not, or they can change it.
They can change it, but
Yeah.
I know, like typically past interactions I've had with similar things, and if we have good feedback and the sponsors are receptive to the feedback, we could provide them with suggested amendments, and they could bring forward an amendment to the committee, or the committee could choose to draft an amendment themselves based on the testimony that they hear.
I just see this as a possibility that smaller communities could lose out altogether. And if they're down to one representative and that representative can't be there for a meeting with a specific vote, then they're done. You know, they don't, I mean, I feel badly for Milton because, and the other communities that have no one here, that Milton had a project this year that didn't go through because they didn't have an advocate. And I'm worried about that smaller communities would fall off the face of the earth.
I agree. It's a real concern.
I also agree.
some of the smaller communities may drop out financially.
Yeah.
That's Tom. Let's say our names. You know, we're in 2 different places and
Yep.
we're all wearing masks. It's really, it's almost like some kind of a game to try to figure out where the sounds are coming from. So Mike Levinsky?
Yeah, so I don't know the background of this either and the genesis of it. If we had a little more on that, maybe I'd feel a little differently, but on the face of it, I guess I would recommend that we don't support this. I think that, you know, to reduce the number of commissioners that represent the region without really any clarity about that, and then leaving the larger populated communities with their base. I just think, you know, not in the short run, the long run, you know, there could be some issues surrounding votes and those kinds of things that I think that we might not necessarily want to see. I think that being said, and I'm not implying that we don't all work collaboratively, cooperatively as a group, as we do. And I think that's been the strength of SRPC. I would like to see that continue. I think potentially this kind of reduction in representation could lead to some conflict. So I don't support it.
Don?
Don Hannon. Yeah, you know, if I look at the current formula, it starts at 25,000. So if you're over 25,000, you have the 4 representatives. If they want more representation from the larger cities, all they got to do is change that line to for every other 25,000 or whatever, you get X number of more people.
Sure.
And that fixes the problem that apparently this is looking to address. Keeping all these smaller communities to one member, I think is a bad thing. I just, you know, I find it hard to support that because the smaller communities end up losing out. You know, they can't be here for one person. You know, Washington's got 4. I see 3 of us here today, but sometimes there's only 1. You know, depending on schedules. If one person to have make a meeting sometimes is difficult. I just think that it can be fixed by changing the balance. If you have an extra 20,000 people, you get an extra seat or 2 seats, or however many they want to put. And that would fix the representation in the larger cities if that's their concern.
That's another.
But I don't see taking seats away from smaller communities is a help.
Anybody else? I'm sorry, go ahead, Wes.
Yeah, and maybe I missed this in the introduction, but Among the other regional planning commissions, I'd be interested to hear from Jen. Is there one particular region that is looking for this? Is it something that all the regions are, not agreed on this? Has there been any discussion on that?
Yes, there has been discussion. This did not generate from any of the 9 regional planning commissions themselves. And we're all slightly perplexed.
Well, that was very succinct. Joe?
Yeah, it's Joe. I agree with all the comments that have been made, particularly with Mike's not supporting this, but my thing is the optics of this. What I mean by that is we're constantly trying to get more and more people in the community involved in different areas. And this is an optic that says, you know what? We don't want your involvement. And I don't think that's correct. Again, I think to Mike's point, I think we should say no to this for all of the reasons that we said.
Anybody else that remotely? Can you tell me? I can't see.
Evan's in the top right corner.
Yeah,
Evan?
Mr. Chair, yes, I agree. In the few years that I've been a commissioner, I've never seen the other Wakefield representative attend a meeting. So to boil it down to just one, I think is a mistake. I also think if the theory is that less representation is better, perhaps the New Hampshire legislature should, think about that as well.
Well said.
Hold on, that if you'd like. Move the question. Is there anybody else out there that wants to add? I can't see anybody. Wave like crazy if there is.
I don't believe so.
Anybody else here? The only thing I'm gonna say, because I think these have been a lot of great comments. If we, and Jen, you have to help me on this. I thought we were able to take a position of not voting. Okay, we can do that. I'm not suggesting we not vote. I'm just asking you a question.
So you don't have to vote. One of the things I have said is that when it comes to making policy statements and representing SRPC before legislature or the governor's office, we don't do so without your blessing and your direction. So whether it's a motion or just a, hey, Jen, this is where we stand on this, please convey this message, or this is where we stand on this, keep an eye on it. However, that would be how I would proceed.
Okay, so with that, I want to ask one more question. And I always say that, and I always have more than one more question, but I'm going to try this. I'm just making this up. If we were to take no position, but most of the other communities, or let's just make it simple, most of the other commissions or all the commissions did take a position, we could wind up with the result of that without having had any real impact to that decision, right? By being neutral and not saying anything. So silence almost winds up being acceptance of whatever happens if everybody else votes. You understand what I'm saying? You think we were being smart by not taking a vote, and then we've just basically sounded like we don't care. So anyway, a yes vote's pretty obvious. A no vote, to my mind, even if we're not necessarily all in agreement with a no vote, or we're going to get our questions asked. A no vote gives us an opportunity for another day to revisit it. If they answer all the questions, we have more clarity, we understand what their driver is. Point is there's a lot we don't understand here. That's a very uncomfortable vote, I would say. But if we're thinking strategically, I think my view would be to make a no vote as opposed to a nothing vote. That's my thought. And it's not because, and last thing, it's not because I don't think some of the elements of what they're trying to do probably do make sense. But I kind of like what Don said over there about, if you have a higher population, you get another person, because the number of communities that only have one representative or one potential representative is a staggering change here, really is. And we all know when there's a vacancy for something, it takes time for towns to fill it. So they could go for weeks and months, if the one person, moved out of town or something, or out of the county. Or whatever. Peter?
Is basing the criteria on population part of the statute?
Yes,
So it's gotta be based on population, can't be based on any other criteria?
that's what it's based on currently in statute.
John,
As
sorry.
far as taking a vote, does it carry more weight for you, Jen, when you go to the legislature and say SRPC voted no, or they recommended no? Would it carry more weight if we said it was a vote?
Probably.
Then I would suggest that we vote.
Mike?
Yeah, I just would move that we, as a commission, recommend a no vote or denial of this proposed HB 1275.
Second.
Second. Okay. Let's just try to eyes and nays in the room and see how it goes. Everybody, in favor in the room here, say aye. Aye. Does anybody have a nay?
Yay.
Peter has a nay. And I'm gonna give the roll call again out there. Leslie?
Okay, I'm confused. Could you please read it back to me?
There's been a motion made and seconded that says that the SRPC is not in favor of this proposed change. So a no vote would say, but we're still going to present all of our questions because at least some portion of the no vote is based on the fact that we haven't been blessed with information here about what the driver is, and it's not been proposed by any of the regional planning. So does that help?
It does. So I vote in favor of voting no.
Okay.
How does that sound? Does that work? This is like a double negative. Or negating a negative.
Give
Yeah,
us a lot of
I agree.
flexibility.
I vote yay on the motion.
Lindsay?
Yay.
Oh, now we're doing this.
Yeah.
Okay. Wes?
I'd vote yay, but would really like to see more information first.
Most definitely.
Stephanie?
I vote yay.
Yes.
Okay, and who am I missing? Victoria?
I vote yay.
Evan?
I vote yay.
Not everybody?
That is, yes. So I will make sure to continue to follow this bill, and any updates that I have, I'll be sure to forward them. If the bill is withdrawn, I will let you know. If the bill is amended, I will update you on any amendments. Should it be amended such that it becomes amenable, you can always change your no to a yes at that time.
Okay, and so, when is this likely to happen, I apologize?
Again,
We don't know.
it's
yet.
always, yeah, it's always a mystery, but it will likely have a hearing at some point in January. It could be sooner in January than later.
All right, and are you amenable, Jen, if somebody comes up with another idea, something they want to express, they can get in touch with you?
Most certainly, yeah.
So
Please
if
do.
anything comes up and you think of a, something else you wanted to add at this particular point, even though we've taken this vote, there are these questions that are going to be put
Right.
forth, and please share them with Jen, quickly.
It's Joe.
Joe.
My question is there any chance of getting one of these people to come to our meeting and just tell us what their thoughts are?
Sure.
Should we invite somebody?
I know that we'll have an NHARPC meeting, that's the New Hampshire Association of Regional Planning Commissions. Hopefully some point this month, with at least one of the representatives. If that's recorded, I might just be able to share that recording with everyone if they're willing to do that. Because otherwise I know, they might be asked to present 9 more times. Because I'm sure it's not just us. So,
Jen, if you will keep me up to
Yes.
speed with what's going on with
Will
the
do.
correspondence you have.
we'll do.
Will there be minutes to that meeting?
There will.
So
Yes.
they should be available to.
Yes.
That was Barb. speaking. Okay, I think we have it. It's kind of an awkward thing, but we'll get through it. Okay. On to the most interesting part of it, the meeting. Resiliency Roundtable presentation and discussion. And Kyle is going to be leading that, facilitator from SRPC. And Kyle, why don't you introduce everybody and kick us off?
Can everybody see my screen?
We can.
Yes.
Great. So good evening, everyone. Like Dave said, my name is Kyle Pimentel. I'm the principal regional planner, and I'll be acting as the sort of facilitator to sort of kick this off. Just to provide a little bit of background, SRPC started convening these resilience subcommittee roundtables quarterly back, I think around April timeframe. And they were essentially set up as opportunities for discussions to take place with commissioners and the public, and to sort of go back and forth and talk with each other about some interesting topics, whether it's sort of sustainability or hazard mitigation. And typically these roundtables have had several speakers that come in, give a short presentation, and then we kind of open up the floor and spend the majority of the remaining time just having a discussion about what you heard, have any questions answered. And so for tonight's meeting, we've got 2 guest speakers. We've got Rayann Dionne, who's the Resilience and Flood Mitigation Specialist with the Coastal Program, and Bill Boulanger, who's the Deputy Director with the Community Services Division within the City of Dover. And the topic that we're going to be discussing is stormwater, flooding, and sort of overall kind of community preparedness. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go really quickly to just provide a little bit of context, and then I will kind of turn things over to the speakers. So just a few things for everybody to kind of keep in mind, that when we're talking about stormwater, we're talking about flooding and emergency preparedness, we have to kind of look at it through the lens that climate change is going to exacerbate all of these types of issues. And so I've just thrown a few statistics out just to keep, in the back of your minds when we're talking about this. So, for example, rainfall, the state of New Hampshire averages about 44 inches. That number is a little bit higher along the coast. But that average is, for the coast anyway, is expected to increase between 5 and 10% by the middle of the century, and then 7 to 15% by the end of the century. So that increase is going to lead to more flooding. And we'll typically probably see that more in the wintertime and in the springtime. In conjunction with more rainfall, we've also got to deal with sea level rise. As of the most recent climate science that we have that has been downsized for the state of New Hampshire. If global greenhouse gas concentrations stabilize and then they start to decline by the end of the century, coastal New Hampshire can expect anywhere between 0.5 foot and 1.3 feet by 2050, and then 1 foot and 2.9 feet by the end of the century. If greenhouse gases do not stabilize and they continue to grow, which is the track that we are on right now, we can expect to see 1.5 to 3.8 by the end of the century. I will say sort of anecdotally, and Rayann may talk more about this, this science is consistently updated, and even going back to 2014 when we got our first Science and Technical Advisory Panels report, these numbers are trending up, not drastically, but they're not coming down yet. So when we're talking about greenhouse gases, right now we're still on that track of not necessarily stabilizing or coming down by the end of the century. So what that may lead to for coastal communities, coastal property damage, infrastructure damage, health and public safety issues, changes to the local economy, and then also some impacts to our natural resources. Two other emerging threats to again, kind of keep in mind: groundwater rise. This is something that is relatively new, some of the science that's coming out of the University of New Hampshire. So groundwater rise in those zones are projected to extend anywhere between 2.5 and 3 miles inland. So you are very likely as a coastal community to start experiencing the impacts of groundwater rise long before you start seeing the surface water flooding issues of sea level rise. That extent is going to depend on the geography of the lands, its proximity to streams. For those of you that would like to know more information about groundwater rise, Jennifer Jacobs at the University of New Hampshire, as well as Jane Knott, are the two leading researchers on this, who we've actually partnered with on 2 projects in Durham and in Newmarket. But some of what they're finding is really, really interesting. So if you're interested in that type of work, I would encourage you to kind of reach out to them, or contact the Planning Commission. We're happy to make that connection. And then again, some of what that might lead to is saltwater intrusion in drinking water supplies and impacts to groundwater utilities, whether that's water and sewer pipes or other things that are buried in the ground. And then lastly, coastal storm surge. So every year, we already experience coastal storms, whether they're nor'easters or tropical depressions. We haven't really been hit with a strong hurricane in recent memory, but those tend to vary in terms of their damage, all depending on the tides. If you get a heavy nor'easter with a high tide, obviously that storm surge is going to be a lot higher and more damaging as if it were at a low tide. And again, some of what the science is telling us is that as surface water temperatures rise, those tropical storms and hurricane activities might become more intense and more frequent. Again, I'll add anecdotally, the Gulf of Maine is one of the fastest warming water bodies in the entire world. There's some really interesting science about that, but that's one thing that we'll have to be kind of thinking about. So those intense hurricanes, increased winds, hurricane precipitation, it's likely that those are going to be increasing by at least the year 2080. So I'll before I kind of wrap up, just a few photos. These photos that I'll go through really quickly are just some photos that have been taken by volunteers, by town staff that are part of the King Tide photo contest that the Coastal Adaptation Work Group do every year. And this is an opportunity to look at these tides because they tend to be some of the highest tides of the year, usually anything over 12 feet. And it is a glimpse into the future. It looks like, while we may experience 20 of these a year, in another 5 to 10 years, it might be somewhere closer to 50. And so, just running through, these are areas in Hampton. I'm sure you have seen some of these. This is Jackson's Landing along the Oyster River in Durham. And so this is I showed Jen this picture yesterday. I thought that this was really interesting, that the land for sale is, $3.5 million and it's completely flooded. So, these types of pictures and outreach that has been done with the king tide is a really useful tool to kind of get people to think about how we need to start planning for this, because a lot of this is already here, and this is what we'll need to start anticipating is going to be the new normal of our future. And so, needing to plan now. And so some of the things that the Planning Commission has been doing within this sort of climate resilience realm, there's been a lot of planning work done with master plans, whether that's climate adaptation or energy, so sort of the adaptation and the mitigation side of things. Some groundwater modeling studies, which I mentioned in Durham and Newmarket, an urban street tree plan that we just finished this year in Dover, several vulnerability studies that we've done for our entire coastal communities, hazard mitigation plans for all 18 of our communities, some floodplain mapping. We've also worked on sort of the land use regulatory side, updating stormwater regulations, ensuring that the highest precipitation rates are being used and the designs of those stormwater BMPs or infrastructure is able to handle increased precipitation, floodplain, landscaping, and water efficiency regulations. I already mentioned the King Tide contest. We did an art project with a professor down in Northeastern in Durham. We did a climate in the classroom project in Portsmouth and in Durham. We also have a building equity project that's ongoing in the city of Dover right now to kind of look at how climate policies may impact certain populations differently than others. And then thinking about, our natural resources, looking at how we can make a higher priority on flood storage or areas that might flood from sea level rise as areas to think about for land conservation, living shoreline projects within the region, and then also starting to put together some watershed-based plans. So that's sort of some of the things that we've been working on. And so I kind of just throw that out there, hopefully this will spur some questions at the end. But with that, I will turn things over to Rayann to talk about an upcoming project about the Flood Smart Seacoast project. And with that, I will turn things over to Renee.
All right, great. So thanks for having me today. I recently joined the DES Coastal Program, as Kyle mentioned, as their Resilience and Flood Mitigation Specialist. Before this role, I was the Town of Hampton's Conservation Coordinator for 12 years. In that role, I focused on wetland and floodplain management, conservation, and compliance. For the next 18 months, I will be supporting and managing the Coastal Program's 2021 NOAA Project of Special Merit, which is called the Flood Smart Seacoast Project. Kyle, can you go to the next slide? Kyle showed some great pictures. Here's some more. We've certainly seen that New Hampshire's coastal communities face a range of challenges as they grapple with how to best adapt to present day and future flood risks. Many of these communities struggle to allocate the necessary resources to complete the steps for identifying, evaluating, educating, funding, and implementing important resilient and flood mitigation strategies. Kyle, next slide. So kind of with these challenges in mind, the goal of the Flood Smart Seacoast project is to build regional capacity and coordination for greater coastal community, environmental, and social resilience. So we're going to work towards this goal by establishing a regional technical assistance partnership focused on coastal floodplain management and hazard mitigation. And we're also going to work towards this goal by providing direct technical assistance to help communities do things like incorporate the best available flood risk science into their decision making, help them adopt higher floodplain management standards, and then also kind of identify and scope projects that are eligible for FEMA's hazard mitigation funding. We are pleased to have several project partners. In addition to SRPC, we're going to be working with the Homeland Security and Emergency Management, the Office of Development and Planning, which now houses the State Floodplain Manager, the Rockingham Planning Commission, and also UNH Cooperative Extension and New Hampshire Sea Grant. So this project is just gearing up. Most of our tasks are going to be kicking off in January of 2022. But my intent today was just to go over some of the tasks that RPC will be directly involved in, and then to share a few additional efforts that will have products that I think might be useful to SRPC. Next slide. So one of the first tasks is to convene a FloodSmart Seacoast partnership, which is composed of staff from the organizations that are shown here. The partnership's primary goal is to understand current and future capacity needs, and then to develop a long-term strategy for creating and sustaining a regional program that supports coastal floodplain management and hazard mitigation. So an example of how the partnership might address capacity needs, they might consider exploring the creation of a permanent regional position that's dedicated to helping these coastal communities implement the New Hampshire Coastal Flood Risk Guidance, adopt those higher floodplain standards, and access hazard mitigation funding. Next slide. The next task is to provide pro bono flood management and hazard mitigation technical assistance and training to our coastal communities. So for this task, we're working with SRPC plus RPC and UNH Cooperative Extension and New Hampshire Sea Grant. Each organization will provide technical support to 2 to 3 projects that aim on addressing these following areas shown here. So again, helping communities identify ways to incorporate the coastal risk guidance into their local plans and land use regulations, providing support to a community looking to draft more stringent floodplain regulations, helping them draft amendments that exceed the National Flood Insurance Program and also account for future coastal risk, flood risk, excuse me. And then the last one is helping a community select, probably from their hazard mitigation plan, and scope a project that would be eligible for FEMA hazard mitigation funding. So this type of support could be, creating that eligible list of projects, identifying potential sources of non-federal match. That's always a challenge for these communities. Like, how can we meet that match requirement? And then also preparing those application materials. I think these 3 categories provide a lot of flexibility for these partners to tailor the projects to kind of fit the community's pressing flood mitigation or resilience needs. Since this particular project, is going to span that 18 months, we envision doing kind of a simple solicitation process, like issuing letters of intent. And that way we can really maximize the amount of time that you guys have to work with your selected communities. And then in preparation for this technical assistance, we've added funding to this grant to allow staff to complete at least 2 trainings that are related to floodplain management or hazard mitigation assistance. And I believe SRPC has already actually started that and had staff that attended a recent FEMA cost benefit analysis webinar back in the beginning of November. Next slide. So these are 4 other efforts that fall under this project that SRPC won't be involved directly, but I think have products that you might find really useful. The first one is we'll be working with the State Floodplain Management Coordinator, Jennifer Gilbert, and speaking with local floodplain managers to kind of assess the needs and ideally increase our FEMA community rating system participation across the 17 coastal communities. The CRS, the community rating system, is a voluntary program for those communities that are already participating in the National Flood Insurance Program. And basically they join this program because they get credit for activities that they are doing that are kind of above and beyond the National Flood Insurance standards. And once they enter this program, policyholders within their community, flood insurance policyholders, can receive a discount on their insurance premium. So there's some good incentive there to get credit for things you might be already doing, and then also pass that benefit on to your communities. We will also be inventorying each of the, oops, I'm sorry. Sorry, so the second one, we will also be working with Jennifer Gilbert to update the 2018 menu of higher floodplain regulation standards for New Hampshire communities. We will research, update, and expand this menu to include innovative best practices that account for future coastal risk. An example of an update might be to provide an explanation on how to use the coastal flood risk guidance to determine a more community-specific and appropriate freeboard height that accounts for future sea level rise and storm surge. If you're not familiar with freeboard, it's an additional margin of safety that elevates the structure's lowest floor above the minimum height standard that is set in the community's floodplain regulations. The third task here, we will be reviewing the hazard mitigation plans in each of the 17 coastal communities and creating a living portfolio or database of at least 10 regional projects that meet the eligibility criteria for FEMA's hazard mitigation assistance funding. This portfolio can be used to help inform future technical assistance projects. And it's also hoped that it will be helpful in kind of kickstarting some of those applications when those funding opportunities arise. And then the last project that I wanted to share with you is we're going to be working with RPC in the town of Hampton to design and pilot a just and equitable flood mitigation and relocation program. So the intent of this program is to enable the town to identify and prioritize candidate properties that would be eligible for FEMA mitigation assistance for either elevating the structure or for doing a voluntary buyout. So the goal is to develop this kind of comprehensive process and then develop 1 to 3 applications that we would submit for either, again, home elevation or for a buyout. I think this is going to be a really interesting process to kind of see how it evolves. And, you know, I'm hopeful that it's something that could be kind of transferred over to another community if they were interested. Next slide. So again, thanks for having me today and letting me share some details about this project. I'm really excited for things to get underway, and I'm looking forward to working with SRPC. I'm hopeful that this increased focus and support will help our coastal communities increase their resilience and really kind of move that needle on accessing that federal funding. If you have any questions or want any more detail on these efforts, you know, here's my contact information. Natalie DiGeronimo is the other coastal member that will be working on this. So I don't know if you want to do questions now or after, but that's what I have for you.
Yeah, I guess I would defer to the chair on what you would like to do. I think if we do Bill's presentation next, I could stop sharing, or we could stop sharing our screen. It might be a little bit easier to see everybody, but it's up to what the commissioners would like to do. If they want to ask any sort of clarifying questions now and save the kind of back and forth till afterwards, but it's up to you guys.
Well, I guess, this is Dave. I guess my thought is I think we ought to take some questions now while it's fresh. There's a lot of information there. And we could still refer back to this even after Bill's presentation if more things come out and we want to add to what we asked. So I actually prefer that we take it that way if it's not too inconvenient, you know, for the whole process. Does that sound reasonable? Anybody
That's fine with me.
Okay. Why don't we start out in the remote locations? Mix it up a little bit. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Questions or comments for Rayann and for the rest of us that you can share? jump right in, because usually you're the last people to get a chance, and we're good, we let you go first this time. Lindsay? Yeah, hi, Lindsay. Go ahead.
Hi, mostly just a comment. Thank you for the presentation and for all of the detail that you have there. And I think just from a Dover, well, I have a couple different hats, but from a Dover perspective, just really excited to think about what this whole project can mean for our communities and for our region, and working together and really thinking about taking a step forward on some of these sort of figuring out how to implement and move forward. So mostly just to say really excited about what this can mean for our region.
Great.
Kyle, are you raising your hand there?
I am. Again, it's more of just a comment, but one of the things that I wrote down as Rayann was kind of going through her slides was part of this project will help identify or get a community ready to apply for a hazard mitigation or pre-disaster mitigation application. And, you know, in working with some of the smaller communities, one of the two biggest hurdles that I have heard from municipalities, and this isn't necessarily just for small communities, but they tend to have a harder time with it, is all the administrative side of things with getting all of their materials together to submit an application, and then the in-kind match piece of it are two really big challenges. And I've had a lot of conversations with folks from Homeland Security, and they have said, you know, that there's money there, and that there's a lot of time that money goes unspent because there are communities that you know don't apply because there's too much of an administrative burden, or that they don't have the match. And so I see that component of the project of getting a community ready to move forward with implementation of some sort of, whether it's a construction project or whatever it may be, having that technical assistance to move them forward, I think would be a real benefit and a really cool eligible project. So I would encourage, you know, the commissioners to take this back to their communities and to say, you know, when these mini grants become available, you know, to really kind of reach out to the Planning Commission if they've got a mitigation project that they're interested in. But just, you know, it's been kind of sitting on the back burner. I think this would be a good opportunity to move that forward. So I really look forward to, the whole project, but I really look forward to seeing that move, you know, hopefully gain some traction with communities.
Yeah, I would just add to that, Kyle, that, you know, I think there's a lot of projects that communities might be doing that they might not realize that they could use for match for some of these things. So they could be doing some culvert work just as part of a regular thing. And, you know, they might be able to use that for match for, you know, some, to kind of do a bigger project or add on. So I think it'll be really good to kind of look through those hazard mitigation plans, really kind of pull out those things and highlight them and talk to the communities, because I absolutely agree that it is kind of an untapped resource. So.
Anybody else out there that's got another comment or question? Okay, I'm gonna go turn to the room here, but before I forget to ask, we all know about the match that's often necessary for a community to get. It's often like 20%, some number like that, you know, and it can be a burden for people. And since we're a regional group, it's the different things that we talk about, you know, monthly and stuff with funding sources and all that. Is there a place where matches can come from to help out a community that can't come up with their own match?
Great question.
Okay, well, that's something that if we could kind of look into that. I don't need an answer, but because we're kind of all in this together, which we really can't have communities, any significant number of communities that aren't participating in doing things, because ideally everybody's going to be, you know, getting engaged, taking some action, trying to have access to funds. And so, and that's just that's just an access to funds component.
Right.
So I'm curious. In the room, please.
Well, David, just to follow up on what you said,
Mark.
Yeah, the slides are great. Having worked 18 years for the town of Hampton, I recognize some of those locations. But if we remember back however many years it was ago to the Mother's Day, to the infamous Mother's Day flood, the Salmon Falls River really flooded and impacted a lot of communities. I was on the school board at the time, and our facilities director was also the fire chief for the town of Milton. And he had a very serious decision to make, to release water from the dam up there, which would come down and flood Rochester and flood Somersworth and further on down, or not. And he watched that dam very, very closely, and it ended up not releasing substantial amounts of water. But collectively, those communities could, I would think, potentially work together. And that might help somewhat with the matching dollars, but I think that's worth something to ask about.
That's a good example.
Yeah, just building on Mark's comment. So City of Somersworth, really through some of the work Kyle assisted us with some years back, and then recently with an update to our city's hazardous mitigation plan, we filed a grant for the Salmon Falls Road, actually, for the engineering of redesigning that road to accommodate elevation, different elevation, for protection of flooding and protection of property. In the event that the Salmon Falls floods again, what occurred during the Mother's Day storms, properties were basically landlocked. I mean, you couldn't get out. So not that it's not an answer for everything, but one of the mitigations that we're looking at is, can you raise the elevation of the corridor a mile plus, at least in this case, in the Somersworth piece, to mitigate that flooding that will occur, could occur. So it doesn't damage properties. Issues about grades and elevations, driveways are all part of that, but it's something that we actually have on the in a competitive grant that we applied for about 2 years ago, I think. Between COVID and other stuff, it's all kind of been on hold, but something to look at. My last question was just as we were talking about it's more of a question for me. How does this work then help with the pre-disaster mitigation grants in terms of, is it background information, or just help me just understand that? It's kind of just maybe I didn't listen to it correctly. The work that you will be doing.
So our hope is to kind of do some of that initial groundwork to get these communities ready, if that's, if they were to pick that as a project they wanted to work with our technical assistance partners with. But yeah, it could be identifying those projects, getting the grant materials together so that it's just ready to go. Because I think, as Kyle pointed out, that's sometimes a pretty big lift for a community to do, and they don't have staff capacity or to tackle that. So our hope is to get them pretty much ready to go for that when that funding opportunity comes available. And this project was or proposal was written over a year ago, and there may be even additional funding opportunities coming down the road that we could also tap into. So I just think it's a really good time to be as prepared in that aspect as we can be. I would also note that so I worked in Hampton and I live in Hampton, so that's a lot of where my experience is. But just to go back to that match piece, Hampton voted to spend some money to do some flood studies on 2 sections in Hampton, and then we're able to actually take that money that the voters were putting towards just that one aspect of the project, but they were able to take that and use it as match to then actually start to design and implement some of the recommendations that came out of those studies. So I think the more we can think about, we might have one task right now, but how that task could dovetail into another one and another one is a really great way to kind of extend that funding and kind of get the most bang for our buck.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to move on to Bill in a second. Anybody else real quick? There's only one thing I wanted to ask before we, well, no, go ahead. I'll ask it at the very end. Kyle, you want to pick up again with Bill?
Sure, yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just turn things over to Bill. I think, Bill, did you want to share your screen?
Yeah, I want to share my, if I can share my PowerPoint. If I can get it up, I can find it here. You can't see that, can you? Yeah, see the storm, let's see. So I gotta hit share. I'm sorry, trying to get trying to share my presentation and I can't find it.
Once you have your presentation up, if you click the green share screen button at the bottom of Zoom, and then it'll give you some options of what you want to choose, what you want to share. You're going to click what you want to share, and then you're going to click share. It'll be 2 clicks.
So I hit share screen first. All right, then I want to share this present. I want to. Okay, let's see.
Yeah.
Hear that?
Yes.
There you go.
Is it up?
Yeah.
Okay, so Kyle asked me to talk to the group about basically stormwater and what Dover's doing for stormwater issues and what we're doing and what we're planning for what we did kind of this past year. So I wanted to give you kind of some snapshots of what we've been having to deal with and what we're doing. So this first slide you see is on a street that's probably got a 4%, 5% grade with no catch basins on it. And we used to have a paper street right past the house, but because we never developed it, that the landowners took over the land, and this individual built the house right on the bottom of this road. And before we tore it up, when it would rain, it would actually washed out all his landscaping all the way down to the footings of his house on both sides. So, you know, buyer beware or builder beware when you build a house on the end of a paved road that doesn't have any catch basins on it. So this portion of the road was originally supposed to have a rain garden on the end of it for the Berry Brook project. So when the homeowner came to us and asked us to do it, I didn't have an easement through there. So all I had was a sewer easement. So he had to provide us with a utility easement, which took him over 18 months to get because he had to deal with the property owner next door. The city wasn't going to do that for him. So he ended up finally getting the easement. And so we did the repairs and we put in a rain garden. So what you see now is the road. The road, when it's finished, you'll see there's 2 catch basins up further. And then we put 2 other catch basins down by his house. And you can see how, if you just imagine, you know, a 3-inch rainstorm when this catch basins weren't here, where all that water went. And went down his driveway and made a hard left and washed out everything around that beautiful home on both sides of the house. It just took it all out. And very frustrated family was frustrated with the city a little while, but once we got the easement, we mobilized and took care of it this summer, but it took a couple of years to get it done. So on the side of the house, we installed a BMP or a rain guard. And so we are able to saturate some of that storm water into the ground. But we have overflow devices in case it gets too high. You can see the leaves up on the left here that when we had that 2.5 inches of rain a couple of weeks ago, it did overflow, but it isn't meant to capture all the rainfall. It's meant to slow it down so it doesn't affect the Berry Brook. So that's one of the accomplishments that we did this year. Another addition to the Berry Brook project. We did 27 BMPs on the Berry Brook. So this is just another added feature to that, so it helps out the brook. Part of the grant, we did end up putting a tree filter in, and then maybe Kyle can show that video, that pilot video after that we put together as part of the grant to put some type of treatment in an urban core to treat stormwater. So we built a tree box out of wood. So that's a, so it isn't a precast structure. It's a wood structure. So it's made out of, natural and stuff. And, but we're going to plant a tree here. And then what we also did was we put a media box upstream of it. So this media box is something that myself and the stormwater, UNH stormwater people invented. And it's it acts like a catch basin first. And then in here we add media, and it's all organic media. And that media treats the stormwater. Then that water goes down into the tree filter, and the tree gets water. But the new thing that we came up with this year is that most of the communities in the Seacoast are part of what we call an MS4 permit. And we have to do stormwater management more than we ever had to do before. And so some of the things that we're doing now is that we have to clean our catch basins more frequently. So the city of Dover cleans their basins every other year. So like this year we did the southern end. Next year we'll do the northern end of the city. And what we're trying to get a handle on now is sweeping, because we're finding out that a lot of this organic material that's on the streets is high in nitrogen and phosphorus. So we're trying to pick that up and get, dispose of it instead of letting it sit on the curb and run into the catch basins, and that nitrogen and phosphorus ends up into the streams and rivers. So leaves have a high nitrogen content. So what we're trying to do is pick up them leaves. So this buggy you see here, our Bearcat, we actually made this device. We found it on YouTube that other towns were doing in the Midwest. So all we use is the garage folks made this up, and they use old brooms off the sweeper and we just go down the street and we pick up the bulk of the leaves, because the mechanical sweepers can't pick up the leaves real good, but this thing does. It picks it up, and then this is our pilot program, but we're pushing them into a solid waste can. You can see the can in the background, but he'll get in front of this unit and he'll push it in front of it. So what the unit leaves is still quite a bit of organic. So what we're doing right after we put that unit down through there, we're actually sweeping the road this time of year. We're not even putting water down, we're just sweeping it. So this is a pilot program. We're trying to get as much done now before the snow flies. And if it works out real good, I'm on a committee to get credit for street sweeping and leaf pickup. So we're going to see what credit we can get for doing this process. But this is all new for public works people to do. And I'm sure Mike Babinski and some of the other public works officials can attest to that it's not something that we used to do. We used to just let them leaves sit in the gutter till spring and then try to sweep it up then. But we're trying to actively see if we can mitigate, get them leaves off there and reduce the nitrogen levels and see if that we get good credit for doing that. The last slide I got here is that we still have a lot of public education to do, because this individual mowed all his grass from his house all out into the street. So you can imagine all that organic material out there in the street. And it was going to rain like 2 days after he did this. So we had to respond to that. The guy who cut the grass didn't call us. It was the neighbors who called us. So we went out there with the sweeper and tried to pick up as much of that as we could before it rained, because one, it would have clogged the catch basin, and two, we didn't want all that nitrogen and phosphorus into the storm drain. So the other thing we're doing too is that every time we turn around and do a project, we're either looking at ways to treat or hold stormwater to mitigate the amount of water that's being rushed into the rivers to slow that process down, to not have so much flash going into the rivers and streams. So all our new projects that we do, we're looking at that kind of system. The biggest one we're trying to figure out right now, we just hired a consultant to do this, where we're redoing Henry Law Avenue in River Street as part of our waterfront development. So we want to look at Henry Law Park, the lower Henry Law Park, and see if we can put either a above ground treatment system, build a nice featured park down there with the and use the help treat some stormwater. But if the park won't let us do that, we're looking at maybe putting something underground to use as a storage facility, and then let the water eventually trickle out into the river to slow the flash and get treated. You're really not going to treat it, just slowing it down, settling it out and let it take some of the settlement out of it. The other thing that we're doing right now too is that part of our MS4 permit, we've had to test all our outfalls for what we call illicit connections. So if there's a sewer tied into the drain, by testing that during dry weather flows, if we find water in the drain pipe, we test it, and we've found one hit so far out of all our outfalls. So we're pretty excited about that we don't have to go chasing a lot of illicit connections. And what's happening in the future, we're going to have to test all our outfalls during the wet weather events and see what kind of contaminants we come up with when that process happens. But we haven't had to do that yet. So, but there's a lot of extra duties that we're having to do on the public works side to trying to meet the MS4 permit. But a lot of it, we're trying to get a little bit of the low hanging fruit first, and then before we have to put in big treatment systems. So we're very, we're hopefully that we can accomplish that and get good credit through the state and EPA, so we can manage our nitrogen permit requirements and phosphorus. So with that, I'll let Kyle. We had to do a media for a video slide for our grant that we did for the tree stuff that we did downtown. So I'll let Kyle show that if he wants to.
Yeah, Bill, if you want to stop sharing your screen, and just to give a little bit of background information, Bill referred to a grant a couple of times, and that was actually the urban street tree plan that we did. So that was part of Dover's coastal resilience grant that we submitted in 2020. There were three components to that project. One was an urban street tree plan that we did for the Central Business District that we partnered with a former employee, Liz Durfee, on. Then Colin and I worked on updating the city's complete streets policy. And then the third was the stormwater installation piece, as well as some outreach materials that we wanted to put together. And that was in the form of a video. So it's about 4 minutes long. If you guys are open to that, I can play it.
We're good on time, Kyle.
Okay.
So you can do that.
So
Does anybody have any questions specifically for Bill right now, or we good? Okay, okay, go ahead, Carl.
It looks like Rayann raised her hand.
I'm sorry, Rayann.
That's
Go
okay.
ahead.
I was just curious, Bill, when you were talking about doing the sweeping of the leaves, you said you were trying to get credit, and I was just curious the credit you were referring to.
Well, part of the stormwater requirements, the EPA is going to give credits for some of this activity that we do. But we haven't come up with a true credit for leaf pickup. So we're through UNH, and we have a committee that we're tasked through New Hampshire to come up with this credit. And I sit on that committee to try to find out, how much street sweeping is going to be worth, how much catch basin cleaning is going to be worth, how much leaf pickup is going to be worth, because there's a lot of people who are studying all this stuff and they're trying to get us to a point to say, if you pick up not only leaves, but any organic on the street, you're going to get credit not only through us, but you're going to see credit through less nitrogen going into the rivers and streams. So we're having a lot of discussions about what that credit should be, because we don't.
So this is for the MS4.
For the MS4,
okay.
and we don't, we're doing a lot of, like you see that new pilot with picking up the leaves. That's a lot of extra cost for the city in actuality, because we've never done it before, and it's going to be extra cost for other cities too. And so we're trying to beat the brush to see what is the best way to pick it up and what the credit should be. We don't want to get nothing for it. We want to be able to get some. So it keeps the regulators off our back if we get some good credit for it.
Yeah, I guess I would just follow up with that sometimes those activities can also get credit in the community rating system. So it's good to kind of keep track of those. And then if, at some point Dover were interested in joining those types of activities, it's kind of double credit in some ways.
Yeah.
So that's very cool.
We'll take anything that we can get, because it's just hard to buy equipment and staff. It's hard to get staff and have the equipment too to do these functions like the catch basin cleaning. We actually sub that out because we don't have the staff to do that. We have to sub that out.
I think Jackson has his hand up too before I share my screen.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle, and thanks, Bill, for the presentation, and Rayann. This has been really interesting. Just had a quick comment related to like leaf litter pickup and some of these items. So I come from an atmospheric chemistry background, so I'm always trying to think of the full cycle when it comes to some of this stuff. And I guess I'm just curious, and I'd love to see more information on the trade-offs versus, atmospheric deposition of nitrogen species versus what you can remove via like leaf litter pickup, right? Because a lot of the current equipment that community service departments rely on are diesel-based, internal combustion engines. And obviously diesel has NOx output to it. So I'm thinking in terms of a credit system, it might be good to incorporate, basically a higher credit for using equipment that's zero emission. So if you had an electric street sweeper or electric pickup related equipment, I think you should really get more value added credit than if you're using maybe diesel operated equipment. So just a comment on that. And I know it's really complicated and super hard to model. And I think that's why programs like PTAP at this time don't have those features in them. But it's always something I like to throw out there because I can't help myself. But that's all I have.
I found, I got a lot of education sitting on this committee, just the different types of sweepers to pick up that organic because we're calling it organic contaminant now, because it is a contaminant, but it's an organic one. But it's just the different types of equipment to pick that up. You know, we're looking at credit for that, you know, even though if it's gas or diesel right now, but if you have a vacuum unit instead of a mechanical unit to do your sweeping, it's going to pick up more of that organic material off the street, and that's where you're getting the big bang for the buck. So, and which City of Dover does not have a vacuum unit. I wish it did, but it's down the road. I mean, everybody's facing the same issue. We're going to have to come up with this different mechanisms to pick up the material.
Thanks.
Okay. Roll there, Kyle.
So yeah, before I play the video, just this is still in draft form. This is not quite the final, but we're really close. And just to kind of pick up of what something Rayann said before, the creation of this video, the city's staff time to put this together in conjunction with the installation, that was all part of their in-kind match piece for the grant to do the street tree plan and the complete streets policy update. So like we built that into the proposal that like this would be a deliverable outcome, but it took some staff lift to do this, and we used that to leverage the funding, the federal funding, to do the other components of the project. So it's just sometimes you have to be creative on ways to do that.
My name's Bill Boulanger, and I'm the Deputy Director for the Community Service Department. The project that I was tasked with was to install a treatment system for a downtown storm drain. It's very hard to have treatment in the urban core. So people were talking about putting in tree filters or some type of treatment to collect stormwater and treat it before it goes to the river. Typically, they would put in a cylinder and just plant a tree in it and then have all the water go into the tree, what we call the tree box. It's generally a cement cylinder. The issue I have with that is that you have to go in there and annually or biannually take the dirt out, take the trash out, and redo it over. They generally have like steel grates, and they have an inlet right off the street, right into it. And so anything that's coming down the street, like leaves or cans or paper, trash, that all ends up in there. So it's not really good for the tree anyways. So my project was to put in a media box, what I call a media box, which is a catch basin, and then it has like organic media to treat the stormwater. And then we tied it into the tree. We built our own tree box and tied it into that. And then we had an overflow, so if we had too much water, that would flash over to the drain line. But the goal is like during a normal rain event, that water would go through the media that's in the media box, get some treatment, and then fill the tree filter, the tree box, and then if there's too much, it would go into the drain. You're trying to build systems that organically or naturally you're trying to treat the stormwater. One, it removes the settables and floatables from just going to the river, because back in the day we used to just tie it to a catch basin, tie it to a pipe, and off it went. The whole flow, water, leaves, nutrients, any of that material that was on the pavement, it would just go to the river. By putting in a treatment system, we're trying to collect that water and absorb it either mainly into the ground, right at its source. So it's not getting, it's not going to the river directly. Trying to recharge the groundwater underneath it. We've done a lot of biosystems, like naturally collect the stormwater and let let it drain into the ground. The Berry Brook was a major project that we did all that. And it's low maintenance for us, so it's not a high maintenance. We're able to do a lot of work and treat a lot of stormwater, but we don't have to do a lot of maintenance on it. So the success we had on Berry Brook, we used into building the media box. And the media box was something that UNH and myself designed. It wasn't something that we asked. We worked with a local precast company to help us build some prototypes. And we had some failures, and then we finally came up with this prototype, and it seems to work. So some of these systems you can put into the stormwater are very expensive, very high maintenance, and the cities and towns don't have that resource to do that. Stratford County Regional Planning gave us the grant money to do the media box, or provided the grant money to do the media box. It's trying to build systems for not only us, but for other communities to see what you can do in a downtown environment.
So I would just, thank Bill and Mike Gillis and the other folks from, media services that helped put that together. But, one of our goals was that this work that not just necessarily Dover, but in other communities, to be able to share this information with others, and, creating a video like this with some footage of the installation and sort of the thought behind it is a relatively low lift way to, be able to share this with other communities. And so when the video is done, we plan to sort of kind of help the city roll that out and to share that with other public works departments, so they can learn or maybe pick up on some of this stuff. But that was sort of the idea, in thinking that and I think Bill said this, that we're all in this together, and that the more that you can kind of pick up on what is shown to be successful, especially in an urban area, for other communities to use that information. So again, I'm really interested to see when this sort of gets finalized, but this was a great project to kind of be able to show the end result in a video like this. So.
Okay, thank you very much, Kyle and our guest. Very informative. Really appreciate your time and effort in talking to us today. And we're looking forward to hearing more as this project unfolds. It's a very interesting and fulsome project. There are a lot of facets to it, obviously. So with that, we will just move on with our agenda and wrap things up. Jen? On the program updates and other business, we have two very brief items. One is the Economic Development District Providence update. I'm just saying, maybe like a minute or two.
James.
Great, thanks, Dave. We said when we adopted the SEDS this year that we wanted to check in periodically and update you on some of our implementation progress, as well as updates when that document came due again. So some things that we've been working on since you last heard from me. When you adopted the plan in July, we did an activity to prioritize some of those implementation actions, and staff are currently putting together some work plans for about 5 or 6 of those things that we're hoping to tackle in the coming year. One of those items did relate to keeping SRPC's Brownfields program going. Our current funding is set to expire at the end of September of 2022. So Jen and I just hit submit on a new grant that would continue that program through 2025. That was submitted last night. And then we would also like to build on some of the recreation mapping projects that we've done over the last few years, and expand those efforts into public art and sort of community vibrancy type of features. So That's probably one of the first implementation work plans to get up and running. So you may hear more about that soon. You adopted a 5-year SEDS, and then for the next 4 years, we will be doing a shorter 1-year update. So expect to hear more from us in January about how we will be doing that process this year. That's generally focused on updating information about the projects that are included in that plan. And I know that we submitted probably 20 to 30 letters of support for various communities for CARES Act, ARPA, various other programs this year. So we're hoping for some good news on those. And then finally, with our CARES Act assistance, we've been talking for a little bit about a program we have in the works for helping municipalities digitize some of their old site plan, subdivision plats, records like that. We are in the process of hiring interns that would help us with the actual legwork on that program. And we also just received the equipment that we would be using in the last couple of weeks, and we're starting to figure out how it works. So look for more information from us. I would say definitely by January, but we're hoping for some more news on that very soon, if possible. Thanks.
Thank you for your update, James. Does anybody have any questions, James, this time? Anybody out there remotely? Wave if you do. Okay, thanks, James. One last item, let's call it B. It's not on there, but there's been some discussion because of the, what appears like it could be an unfortunate direction with COVID-related stuff to get ourselves out and send a letter to the governor on reinstating how quorums can work, and so that if we need to go to, or it just makes a lot of sense for us to go back to the remote way of doing the meetings that we did for a period of time again. We're actually, that letter has expired. I don't know if I'm using the right vernacular here, but the bottom line is we would need to get that given our bylaws, especially given our bylaws. And so,
and statute,
and
RSA
statute,
91A.
RSA 91A. So I don't know if we need to vote on that, or it's more just an informative thing that want to get that letter out and get it rolling, because it's just a prudent thing to do to position ourselves so that we can go back to remote meetings for a period of time. We're ready to do it. And it allows us to conduct our business that requires votes and, things like that. So.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
Okay. So,
and it's not just like us, like tomorrow morning TAC is canceled because we can't get a quorum. Today was challenging to get a quorum. I know that several of our board of selectmen that we've, chat with on a regular basis have had to cancel meetings due to lack of quorum. Planning boards have had to cancel meetings through the lack of quorum. So it's not just us here. It's more what we're hearing also from our communities that our staff support. So.
And I think that the governor executive order, I think that's what it was.
Yes.
There's an emergency order, I think he called it.
Yeah.
There's some emergency order that he actually created. And he had to re-up that, I guess.
So we'll get that into work. Anybody have anything from their communities they want to mention before we finish up? Anybody out there remotely have anything they want to share? You're welcome to do that.
I'll just mention, City of Somersworth, we received, I think, 6 proposals on the solar array for the development of a solar array at the Blackwater Road Superfund landfill site. This is our 3rd try. I think I might have shared that with you guys at some point. Over the last couple of years, we've attempted this and just have not been able to finalize all the pieces of agreement that involves leases and a pilot and possible power purchase agreements or not. But nonetheless, we received 6. We interviewed all 6 this past week, this past week, and we're in the process of narrowing those down to maybe 3, and then we're going to continue with those and bring it down. So, and all 6 of them are very, I think, very competitive and interesting, and they met a lot of some of the things we're looking for. They have various experiences. Some really do specialize in open brownfields and landfills, closed landfills for solar arrays. Others are more both private and municipal. So anyway, more ahead on that for the city of Somersworth. We'll see how far we get.
What's your timeline? If this were to go?
Well, we haven't really defined that, but I would say that it would probably, over the next, 3 or 4 months. There's committees, council committees, city council reviews. Staff really just has to get their arms around sort of the best vendor, best proposer, and then kind of continue our negotiations before we present anything to our council. Anyway, just FYI, it's interesting.
That's really exciting, and I hope you'll circle back with us in a few months and give us a status, because we hear a lot about attempts at doing that kind of thing on former sites like that, and they usually aren't the best news,
Yeah.
So, but that's successful in Somersworth.
Yeah.
We'd like to hear it. Lindsay?
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick item, and I'll share a link once it's ready. Last night, Dover City Council, we had a workshop session focused on updates related to the Tri-City Homelessness Master Plan and sort of what's gone on in Dover over the last couple of years. And I just wanted to mention it here because the strategies that are outlined in that plan, the plan do include a focus on affordable housing and transportation. And I'm forgetting the title. It connects back to the project, Jen, that you mentioned at the beginning as well. But I think it was a really useful sort of overview that some of the other communities might also be interested in seeing, just sort of how that, how Dover is kind of thinking about some of those issues and how they connect. And particularly because it's not unique to Dover, and sort of how the we're connected throughout the region. But I think the recording of the City Council workshop, you should be able to kind of skip around and watch different sections. And so I'll share that link once it's available. But I think others might be interested in that as well.
Lindsay, is that going from the city's site, or is that going to maybe be on channel 22 as well, or what are you thinking?
Yeah, it'll be, I can get the video link from the website, but I'm sure it'll rebroadcast on channel 22 as well.
Thank you. All set? Well, we have a citizens forum. I don't know that we have anybody.
We do have one attendee. If you do have anything you would like to share, you're more than welcome. Not hearing anything.
Looks like all of you had something you wanted to say. No?
She's our city engineer.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
She may have something to say. So ask her.
That's okay. If not, then motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Everybody remotely say aye.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.